Namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start the class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhava Swaha, Tatsavitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. Om Sehna Vavatu, Sehno Bhunaktu, Seviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvi Navadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti 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 Om. In this Thursday's class, we are studying Kathopanishad. And as you know, there are 2 chapters, and each chapter has 3 sections. And we are towards the end of the second section of the first chapter. We ended our class with the verse number 24 last week. And we saw how Yamaraj, Lord of Death, he is explaining the qualities we need to cultivate to really know ourselves. He says we have to turn away from adharam. We have to make sure that our senses are in our control. We have to make sure there's a tranquility in our mind. He says, who has not found in his mind a peace within itself because of the anxieties regarding the fruits of its actions cannot attain this stage, cannot be Atma-vantaha. So the sadhana has to be there. So get rid of all the immoral and unethical activities. And learn the art of controlling your sense organs. Do the practices of concentration of the mind so that you keep on cultivating greater vigor and efficiency. And then completely detach yourself. The mental anxieties for the enjoyment of the fruits of your tapasya also. Not just the worldly actions, the fruits of the tapasya too. So let's see what he says in the last verse of this chapter. Verse number 25. Yasye brahmacha kshatram cha ubhe bhavata odana mrityu yasye upachetsanam ka ittha ved yatrasa. Yasye, to whom? Brahm over here means the Brahman. Cha means and, kshatram, kshatriya. Cha means and, ubhe both, bhavata or odana, cooked rice. Mrityu, death, yasya, to whom? Upasechanam, that's like a condiment, a pickle. Ka means who? Ittha, thus, ved, knows, yatra, where, sa means he is. So Lord of Death, he is saying to whom? The Brahman and the Kshatriya, those classes, are as it were but cooked rice. And death itself is a condiment. How can one thus know where that Atma is? Over here, the question from that young Nachiketa was, I want to know the Atma. I want to know that which does not perish. That is the Atma. presiding factor. So over here, in the end of this section, the Lord of Death is saying that all that manifested world is but a morsel for him to be digested. That means it doesn't mean anything to him. Total detachment. And to such a supreme, even the threatening process of death, mrityus yasya upchesanam, the threatening process of death is just a pickle, it's just a condiment. That means like an extra taste to its appetite. So all this in this manifested world, different classes, different forms, different names, doesn't mean anything to him. It's just like a cooked rice. So when such is the might and power of pure consciousness in its absolute nature, that's why we have to do the sadhana, to really realize it. This is something not just to talk about, but to realize. So processes of self-perfection, self-purification, he mentioned earlier, we need to go through to be here, what he's talking about. So, but he says the Supreme Soul is realizable. It has to become a very intimate experience, irrespective of the position or station or even the death. All of that does not mean anything because you know who you are in essence. So this ends this section. Now let's start with section 3 of chapter 1. Ritam pibantoho sukritasya loke guham pravishtahu parme pararthe chaya tapo brahma vida vadanti panch agnyo yecha trinachiketaha. Ritam. Over here, ritam means the fruits. Pibanto, enjoying. Sukritasya, of the good deeds. See, su means good. Krit means actions. So of the good actions. Loke, in the world. Guham, in the cavity of our heart. Pravishtav, that means seated, being seated. Parme, supreme. Pararthe, abode of Brahma. Parartha. Chaya tapaho, like the shadow and light. Brahma Vida, the knowers of Brahma. Vadanti, call them. Panch Agnyo, the performers of the fivefold fire. Yecha, and also Trinachiketa, those who have performed 3 times the Nachiketa's fire. And we learned about this earlier. Okay, the Yagyas. The two who enjoy the fruits of their good works. Being seated in the cavity of the heart, the seat of the Supreme, the knowers of Brahma call them shadow and light, as also the performer of the fivefold fire, and those who have performed the 3 times the Nachiketa's fire. So where is it? Two who enjoy? See, pibanto, that really means the two. Pibanto word is for two. The two who enjoy. We'll see that in this section, that famous metaphor of the chariot, Yamraji will explain to us. In the chariot, there are 2 sitting. Atma and the body. Those are the 2. Driver and the owner. In the body stays the Paramatma, the self, and also the Jivatma, the ego. These are the two he's talking about. So to introduce these two factors, the Atma and the Jiva, there's a lot of depth in this very opening stanza of this section. He is saying what all the other saints who have realized saints have said. Because they all declare that though the body seems to be controlled and directed by these two factors, one of them is but the shadow replica of the other. And that's what this Chaya Tapo is. One is real, the other one is just a shadow. The shadow or the reflection has no independent existence of its own. That's why this ego cannot function without the Atma. Mind cannot function without the Atma. So the real light is the light of the Atma. The individual in his or her extrovertedness, gazing outside, views this shadow and starts to identify himself or herself with it. So remember, the shadow represents the I ego, the small I. And this is the I which suffers the mortal agonies, all the physical pains, all the mental tortures, all the intellectual failures, wherever we feel the agony, this is because of that little I. And this shadow, the Chaya, is called the Jivatma. Okay. And the light that causes it is that capital I. So there's a small I, Jivatma, capital I, the self, which is also called God principle. And it's called the Paramatma also in us. And let me explain this rhythm word. There are several meanings for rit also. This is a very significant word in the Vedas. Sometimes it means righteousness. Sometimes it's like a divine law that connects the actions and their fruits. So the fruits of actions are enjoyed only by the individualized soul, the Jivatma, the little I ego. So in the mantra, when it says the two enjoy the fruits of their good deeds, the shadow, the I ego, the little I ego, has no existence at all without the presence of the light principle, the capital I ego. So they are coupled together in a general way. So both of them are explained here to be seated in the cavity of heart. So where intelligence resides. So this is, he's trying to explain it to us. This our existence over here. And the 5 fires, they are called, this is from a Karma Kand portion of the Vedas. Grahapatya fire, Ahavanya fire, Dakshina Agni fire, Sabhya fire, and Avastha fire. So these are different names for different kind of yagyas. So that's why he said Panch Agni. Okay, so that's Karma Kandis go through it with a great elaboration. But over here we are the students of the self. Okay, sure, we do the Karam Kand also, but Karam Kands for the purpose of knowing ourselves, so that we can learn to concentrate our mind also. So we are not really into all these different names. I just wanted to mention it to you. This is all in the Vedas. if you're interested in learning. So let's look at number 2. Yasetuhu ijananam aksharam brahma yat param abhyam ti tirshatam param nachiketam shakemahi. Ya means which, setu, bridge, ija, nanam, for those who perform sacrifices, aksharam, immortal, Brahm, yat means which, param means supreme, abhyam, fearless, ti tirshatam, for those who wish to cross this ocean of sansar, ocean of coming and going. Parm, the other shore. Nachiketam, the Nachiketa's fire sacrifice. Shakemahi, we may master. He says, may we master that Nachiketa's fire sacrifice, which is the bridge for those who perform sacrifices, as also that which is the highest immortal Brahma, fearless, and the other shore for those who wish to cross the ocean of sansar. So Setu word, bridge. So Nachiketa fire, which discussed earlier, is described here as a bridge that connects the mortal world of ours with the shores of that immortal world. That's what he means. He says it just connects. It's a Setu. It's like a life in the heavens and life beyond. So this particular verse seems to glorify both the goals of the karma, the worship, and the gyan, the knowledge. So the first part of the mantra is asserting that this sacred fire, if performed sincerely with faith and devotion, as prescribed earlier, can lead the egocentric soul to that realm of consciousness called the heaven. Okay? From this mortal world, by doing the Karam Kand, we reach the heavenly abode. But in the second part of this mantra, there is a glorification of the goal reached by the Jnani. Parm, the other shore. How? Through his meditations upon the nature of the soul and its relationship with the Brahman. So they both are important. So that's what he says, that it's like a bridge. It's like a bridge. But while doing the Karam Kand also, remember the ultimate goal also. Atmanam rathinam vidhi, shariram ratham evatu, buddhim tu sarthim vidhi, mana pragraham evacha. Atmanam, the Atma. Rathinam, the Lord of the chariot. Vidhi, no. Shariram, the body. Ratham, the chariot. Ev means verily, tu means again. Buddhim, the intellect. Tu, but sarthim, the charioteer. Vidhi, no. Manaha, mind. Pragraham, the reins. Ev means verily, cha means and. He says, know the Atma as the Lord of the chariot. The owner of the chariot is the Atma, who sits within it. And the body as the chariot. Know the intellect as the charioteer, and the mind as verily the reins. We have studied Bhagavad Gita. This Kathopanishad was in existence before the Bhagavad Gita was written. Okay? But we are all familiar with this because we have studied Bhagavad Gita many times. So, very famous analogy. And we see it in other literatures also, Hindu philosophical literature, quoted by many authors, many orators also. So in the analogy of the chariot, the self is the master of the chariot. So that's why we always say that the owner is sitting back. And intellect is the charioteer. Body itself is the chariot. And the reins with which the intellect guides the movements of the body is the mind. Okay. So we all of this is in our own body. Indriyani hayan ahu vishyan teshu gocharan atma indriye mana yuktam bhogata iti ahu manishina. Indriyani, the senses. Hayan, horses. Haya means horse. Ahu, they say. Vishyan, the sense objects. Teshu, to them, that means to the senses. Gocharan, roads. Atma, indriya, senses. Mana, mind. Yuktam, united. Bhogata, enjoyer. Iti means thus. Ahu, they say. Manishina, the wise people. So the senses, they say, are the horses. And the roads are the sense objects. So senses go towards the sense objects. Horses, they run on that road. The wise call him the enjoyer. When he is united with the body, the sense and the mind. So continuation of the analogy from the previous mantra. He is just telling us the horses in the chariot picture stands for horses, the senses. Without the sense organs, and what are the sense organs? The ears, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, and the skin. The body chariot cannot move. The senses are needed, and the senses are the horses. These are the instruments given to us so that we can gain the experiences of the outer world. These are called the Gyan Indriyas. So the horses draw the body chariot. We are all familiar with. So this Upanishad says that the sense horses trot on the sense objects. How? See, just like the eye can illumine or function only in the realm of the form. We can never hear with the eyes. The ears can perceive only the sound. So that's why they have their own individual objects to connect with. So on the whole, it means that the sense organs, because of which the body exists, each function in its own field of objects. And the wise person means the sages and the saints. The people who have realized in their lives, they have realized the total perfection. And they are the one who are the authors of the Upanishads. And they are the one who are declaring that true entity in us, which seems to experience the joys and the sorrows of life, is not the Atma, but the conditioned Atma, which we normally call Jivatma. So the supreme intelligence as conditioned by the body and the mind is the ego center, which is a Jiva. Jiva seems to enjoy and suffer the passing circumstances. So he's defining the enjoyer in us. Shruti is definitely making a differentiation for us between the two entities. One, the truth principle, which is the non-doer and non-enjoyer. And the other, the delusion-created ego-centered jiva, which is but a reflection of the supreme intelligence in the mental lake. Okay, so when he talks about two, these are the two. Remember that. That's why with all this sadhana, we got to experience the non-doer and the non-enjoyer, because that's truly what we are. The Shuddha Buddha Atma. Yatu avigyanvan bhavati ayukten manasa sada tasya indriyani avashyani dusht ashvaha iv sarathe. Ya means who, tu means but, avigyanvan, devoid of right understanding. So Vigyanvan is a person who has the right understanding. Avigyanvan, devoid of right understanding. Bhavati is ayukten, with unrestrained. Manasa, the mind, sada, always. Tasya, his indriyani, senses. Avashyani, uncontrollable. See, vash is control, avashya, uncontrolled. Dusht ashvaha, vicious horses. Iv means like, sarathe, for the charioteer. One who is always of unrestrained mind and devoid of right understanding, his sense organs become uncontrollable, like the vicious horses of a charioteer. So that's why it's so important to control our senses. So in this mantra, he's telling us an inefficient charioteer is allowing his reins to be loose, that is a mind, and naturally the sturdy steeds run wild and mad. So dashing even the chariot into the wreckage. So it's not only the horses which are running, horses are attached to the chariot. So chariot goes into the ditch also. So if we allow an indiscriminate intellect to let our mind loose, because mind should be connected with the intelligence, the buddhi. But if we let it loose, then the sense organs, they run wild. Where do they go? Into the sense objects. And they wreck the body into the sensuous excesses. Those are the temptations. So the implication is that if an individual seeker wants to lead a religious life of perfection, if a person wants to move, evolve him or herself, got to keep mind steady with his discriminating intellect and guide the senses properly with a perfect control. Okay, that's what he's trying to tell us. Yatu vigyanvan bhavati yukten manasa sada tasye indriyani vashyani sad ashva iv sarathe. Ya means who, tu means but, vigyanvan, who has a right understanding. Bhavati is yukten, controlled. Manasaha, mind. Sada, always. Tasya, his indriyani, the senses. Vashyani, controllable. Sad Ashwaha, good horses. Iv means like Sarathe of the charioteer. But he who has the right understanding and has a mind always controlled, his senses are always controllable as the good horses of the charioteer. Okay, so it's like an intelligent driver with the help of a proper manipulation of the reins, guides the horses on the road which the master wants to ride through. So the journey of life becomes smooth, fully controlled. But this is with a Vigyanvan, intelligent seeker, with a pure intellect, keeping his mind fully concentrated and restraining and controlling the senses, guiding it, living this life properly, without allowing the horses to run wild. Because otherwise there is a ruin. So this kind of a sadhak controlling the impulses of the mind with a clean discriminative intellect is called a yukta, united. This is what yuktain means. And that's how he's complementing this kind of a seeker. He's calling it a Vigyanvan. Vigyanvan. Okay. That's why right from the childhood we were told, control these senses. Don't let them wander into every which way. Okay. So to enjoy this life, this earthly life also, and in order to move towards this higher realms also, controlling of the senses is extremely important. That's where it starts. Because we all like to meditate. We all have that deep desire to see God, but it starts from this pratyahar, which is called control your senses. Okay. Yatu avigyanvan bhavati amanaskaha sada ashuchi na satat padam apnoti sansaram cha adhigachati. Ya means who, tu means but, avigyanvan, devoid of right understanding. Bhavati is amanaskaha, uncontrolled mind. Sada, always, ashuchi, impure. Na means never, sa means he, tat that, padam goal. Apnoti attains. Sansaram, coming and going into this birth and death cycle. That's a sansar. Ja means and, adhigachati, gets into. And he who is devoid of proper understanding, thoughtless, always impure, never attains that goal and gets into the round of births and deaths. So you can see that he is giving us the outcome of both. If we control ourselves, what can we gain? And if we don't control ourselves, what can happen to us? It's very clear instructions also by this great Devata, so that we can understand it properly. So day-to-day life, it's not just only a few minutes of sitting on our meditation seat. It's not only on some special days. So day-to-day, intelligently following the codes of morality and ethics. Only then we can be successful in our life. Because the practices, the spiritual practices, cannot produce the total effect of perfection unless we are ready for it. Unless we are ready to live a life of truthfulness and a perfect self-control. We all do the bhajan, we do the jap, we do the tap, we go to the temples, we feed the poor also, we give the dhan also. But if a seeker has not prepared to keep the mind under control, senses under control, all of this, whatever I've mentioned, though those are sure good things to do, but again, those are the means to achieve this. But to understand the whole picture over here, those who fail to keep up an intelligent self-control on their endless sense demands, they not only fail to climb up the ladder of perfection, but slowly what happens, they can fall into the scale of evolution, reach these lower states of animal existence also. Today we are human beings, we are in a beautiful human body. But this Jivatma can go down also into a lower strata too. So we got to keep that in mind. So we got to use all the privileges which have been given to us as a human being properly. So Lord of Death is clearly pointing out that the man of no self-control not only fail to reach the supreme state of joy and peace, but also fall back into the sorrow pit at the very center of the whirl of life and death. That's where he's taking our mind to. Let's look at one more verse. This is verse number 8. Ya tu vigyanvan bhavati samanaskaha sada shuchi sa tu tat padam apnoti yasmat bhuya na jayate. Ya means who, tu means what. Vigyanvan, intelligent. Bhavati is samanaskaha, with the mind controlled. So it says sa manasaka, samanaskaha. Sada shuchi, ever pure. So means he, tu means verily, tat means that. Padam, goal. Apnoti, reaches. Yasmat, from where? Bhuya, again. Na jayate, is never born. But he who is intelligent, ever pure, and with the mind controlled, verily reaches that goal. From where none is born again. So if we do what we are supposed to do properly, we go where we are supposed to go, we attain our goal. But if we don't, we'll slip down. So just like we saw in the previous verse, tragic end of a person who does not try to control his sense appetite. Always living in the sensuous excesses, never satisfied. But now in this verse, it's a positive effect. A person is going through a practice, steady practice, has come to have a large share of self-control. Definitely the person is feeling more purity, reaches through the degrees of spiritual growth, that state of perfection, which is eternal. And where a yogi has reached, never comes back. Lord Krishna promised the same thing in Bhagavad Gita to us. We got to Choose the path, walk on it, cultivating the purity, and keep on climbing. Yasmat bhuya na jayate. A true devotee, having lived the life of these teachings and having reached the supreme state, tat padam, shall not return to this whirl of birth and death. This is samsaric life, this mortal existence. Why? Because the supreme goal is the realization of our identity with that all soul, the Brahma, which is the true identification. False identification is with the Jivatma. False identification is with that chaya which we just learned, the shadow. We are not the shadow. We are that light. Birth and death belong to the ignorance created sense of the ego. When the ego has once forever ended in the knowledge of the real nature, all the dreams, the whole delusion of life and death ends. Okay, it's just like when the realization of the truth is there, the false falls away. He's further explaining with this analogy of the Sarthi and the chariot. We'll see that next week. Okay, we can see that what a beautiful way he's explaining to us who we are and how to really realize who we are. So let's do the Shanti Mantra, and after that we'll have some dialogue. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.